the Alini High Council declared Cub 743 genetically unfit and sentenced it to Termination Protocol Gamma 9. Here, on Earth, we call it abandonment. They left the blind cub on a frozen moon to die. The High Council chamber was a symphony of obsidian and ice, the air thrumming with controlled disapproval. 9 figures, tall and gaunt, their silver skin shimmering under the cold light of the central luminary, sat in judgment. Their voices, amplified by resonators, echoed with an almost unbearable precision. Cub 743 exhibits a recessive genetic anomaly, Counselor Zara announced, her tone devoid of warmth. Ocular dysplasia, resulting in complete and irreversible blindness. Another counselor, his face etched with disdain, added, "Such imperfections cannot be tolerated within the Alini lineage. Genetic purity is paramount." A vote was called, each counselor raising a slender, multi-jointed hand in unanimous agreement. The fate of Cub 743 was sealed, a jarring transition. The obsidian grandeur dissolved into a panorama of desolate white. A transport ship, a black splinter against the pale horizon, ejected a small metallic container onto the surface of a frozen moon. The container, barely larger than the cub it held, offered minimal protection against the biting wind and sub-zero temperatures. Termination Protocol Gamma 9. Abandonment. Leaving the cub to freeze, starve, and ultimately cease to exist. The camera lingered on the container, frost already creeping across its surface, then panned upwards to reveal the vast, indifferent expanse of the cosmos. Light years away, on a small, blue planet, Michael Walker stared out at a different set of stars. He stood in the observation dome of a remote research facility, the curved glass reflecting his tired face. Lines of weariness framed eyes that had seen too much and found too little to care about. His hand unconsciously tightened around a half-empty mug of lukewarm coffee. A chime broke the silence. Dr. Aris Thorne, Michael's mentor and the facility's director, entered the dome. Thorne, a man of measured words and even more measured actions, carried a data pad. "Michael," he said, his voice a low rumble, "we have a delivery." "Another shipment of lab rats?" Michael asked, his tone flat. "Not exactly. A cryopod, Alini origin." Thorne handed him the data pad. "They've requested disposal, discreetly handled, of course. Apparently, human scientists are particularly good at making things disappear." There was a subtle emphasis on disappear, a hint of something unspoken. Michael scrolled through the data. Images of a small, furry creature filled the screen. An Alini cub. He followed Thorne to the cryo-storage unit. The pod hissed as it opened, revealing the cub curled in a fetal position, its breathing shallow. Its fur was the color of moonlight, marred only by the faint tremor of its eyelids. Michael ran a diagnostic scan. The results flickered across his augmented reality display. "Ocular nerve atrophy," he muttered. "Blind, just as the Alini indicated." Thorne placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "The Alini have their standards. Best not to interfere, Michael. We have an agreement with them. Sovereignty and all that. Diplomatic repercussions are best avoided." Michael ignored him, his gaze fixed on the cub. A memory flashed in his mind. His younger sister, Sarah, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a bedside lamp, her eyes clouded and vacant. The doctor's words echoing in his ears. "Progressive retinal degeneration. There's nothing we can do." He remembered the sterile smell of the hospital room, the feel of her small hand in his, the crushing weight of helplessness. He returned to his lab, the cub's data still fresh in his mind. Hours blurred into a frantic search. He cross-referenced the cub's genetic sequence with existing human gene therapy protocols. A flicker of hope ignited within him. Adeno-associated virus vector. Targeted delivery. Potentially correctable, he murmured, his fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. He stared at the Alini's assessment report, the clinical language failing to mask the underlying cruelty. Genetic unfit, non-viable specimen, termination protocol Gamma 9, The words burned in his mind. They'd rather let it die than fix it. He whispered, his voice tinged with a growing outrage. Thorne found him hunched over his workstation, surrounded by holographic schematics. "Michael," he said, his voice filled with concern, "don't get emotionally involved. You know how this ends. Remember Project Icarus?" Michael flinched, the memory of that failed experiment, the lives lost, still a raw wound. But this was different. This wasn't about ambition or glory. It was about something far more fundamental. He looked at Thorne, his eyes filled with a newfound determination. "They're wrong, Aris. This cub, it deserves a chance." He turned back to his equipment, his hands moving with a purpose he hadn't felt in years. Vials of gene therapy agents, syringes, and micro-injectors lay before him, bathed in the cold blue light of the lab. He began to prepare. The Eleni mandate be damned. Michael adjusted the focusing lens on the gene therapy array, the faint hum of the device the only sound in the sterile lab. He meticulously checked the flow rate of the nutrient bath, ensuring Lyra's delicate systems wouldn't be overwhelmed. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple as he initiated the sequence. A soft blue light pulsed from the array, bathing Lyra in its glow. The modified genetic material, designed to rewrite the flawed code in her optic nerves, flooded her cells. He watched the monitors, each displaying a complex array of physiological data. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Scans revealed no immediate positive change. The optic nerves remained unresponsive, the blindness persistent. A wave of frustration washed over Michael. He swiped through the Eleni genetic databases on the central console, lines of complex code blurring before his eyes. The information available on this specific anomaly was frustratingly limited, practically non-existent. The Eleni clearly hadn't prioritized research on genetically unfit specimens. A sharp pang of memory pierced his focus. The screech of tires, the sickening crunch of metal. Emily, his younger sister, lying on the pavement, her eyes wide with terror, then slowly clouding over. The doctor's words, cold and clinical. Optic nerve damage, irreversible. Michael, a teenager then, helpless as he held her hand, the world fading to black for her and in a way for him too. He shook the memory away, the metallic tang of fear still clinging to his tongue. He couldn't fail Lyra. Suddenly, a piercing alarm blared from the monitors. Lyra's heart rate spiked, her breathing became erratic, a guttural rasp escaping her small throat. The monitors flashed red, warning of a systemic rejection of the gene therapy. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced himself to focus. He ripped off his gloves and frantically began mixing a modified nutrient solution, drawing on his limited knowledge of Eleni physiology, gleaned from fragmented research papers and educated guesses. He injected the solution directly into her nutrient line, his hands trembling. The modified solution worked, at least for the moment. Lyra's vitals stabilized, but the monitors displayed a cascade of secondary system shutdowns. Non-essential functions flickered offline, conserving energy, a desperate attempt by her body to survive. Michael stared at Lyra, her small form pale and still beneath the blue light. Was he doing the right thing? He was a geneticist, not a miracle worker. What if he was only making things worse? Doubt gnawed at him, whispering insidious possibilities of failure, of causing more harm than good. But then he looked at her, saw the vulnerability in her closed eyes, the fragile hope he had ignited. He couldn't stop now. He wouldn't stop. He spent the next few hours calibrating a third experimental treatment, a risky combination of gene therapy with a low-level electromagnetic pulse. He reasoned that the pulse might stimulate the dormant nerves, forcing them to accept the modified genetic material. He initiated the sequence, his heart pounding in his chest. He watched Lyra's eyes, his breath held captive in his lungs, a flicker, a subtle, almost imperceptible dilation and contraction of her pupils. He leaned closer, his eyes straining to see. Another flicker. It was there. A response, A tiny spark of potential. Be-yep, be-yep. A proximity alert shrieked through the lab, shattering the fragile hope, an unauthorized presence approaching the research facility. Michael, it's Aris, routine inspection, open up. Thorne's voice, calm and measured, echoed through the lab door. His blood ran cold. He scrambled to hide the gene therapy equipment, shoving consoles out of view, covering wires with discarded lab coats. He quickly composed himself, crafting a false explanation for Lyra's presence, anticipating Thorne's inevitable questions. The door hissed open. Thorne stepped into the lab, his expression unreadable. In his hand he carried a datapad, its screen displaying complex Eleni communication protocols. His gaze swept over the room, lingering for a moment on Lyra before settling on Michael. These readings, they don't quite align with your initial projections, Michael, Thorne said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. He tapped the datapad, the gesture precise and controlled. The neural activity is erratic, almost as if the subject is resisting the treatment. Lyra, perched on the examination table, tilted her head slightly. A faint clicking sound, barely audible, emanated from her throat, a subtle mimicry of the hum of the lab equipment, a subconscious attempt to map the space around her. Michael, watching her, felt a surge of protectiveness. We've had some unexpected complications, Michael admitted, carefully choosing his words. But nothing insurmountable. I'm adjusting the parameters now. Thorne's gaze sharpened. There's also a new directive from the High Council, intensified monitoring of all Eleni cub development programs, increased scrutiny of any deviations from the established genetic baseline. They are not pleased with recent reports of inefficiencies. Michael presented a fabricated data sheet, a minor victory in a completely unrelated study of Eleni pheromone regulation. As you can see, Doctor, we are making progress in other areas. This breakthrough could revolutionize Eleni agriculture, increased crop yields, enhanced nutrient density. Lyra focused her unfocused gaze on a nearby sonic scalpel. It swam in her vision, a blurry, silver shape. Tool, she whispered, her voice raspy but clear. Cutting, tool, a flicker of recognition, however flawed. Thorne's eyes narrowed, not at Lyra but at Michael. Perhaps you would be better suited to a different project, Michael. Less sensitive, the pheromone study, for example. It requires a dedicated touch, and I know you have worked with similar species before. Michael met Thorne's gaze, unflinching. I'm committed to seeing this through, Doctor. The potential benefits for Eleni society are too significant to abandon now. He paused, a subtle edge creeping into his voice. Besides, I trust the Eleni want what's best for all their cubs, right? Michael saw it then, a flicker of something in Thorne's eyes. Not anger, not suspicion, but something akin to sadness or perhaps regret. A ghost of a memory flitting across his face. Flashback. A sterile white corridor on an Eleni orbital station. Thorne, younger, his face etched with a relentless drive, oversees the automated euthanasia of an entire cohort of Eleni cubs. Their crime. A minor genetic anomaly deemed unacceptable by the High Council. The air is thick with the metallic tang of disinfectant and the silent screams of a future erased. Back in the lab, Lyra reached out a tentative hand, her fingers brushing against Michael's. I see. Pieces, she whispered, her voice filled with confusion. Light, dark, shapes, but mixed like broken glass. A sharp chime echoed from Thorne's datapad. His expression hardened. The High Council is dispatching a compliance team. They'll be here within the hour to review all active projects. Thorne turned back to Michael, his voice low and urgent. Adhere strictly to Eleni protocols, Michael. Any deviations will be met with swift and decisive action. He paused at the door, his back to Michael. Remember your oath, Doctor, to the Eleni and to the greater good. As Thorne reached the doorway, he stumbled almost imperceptibly, a small, rectangular object slipping from his grasp and falling silently to the floor near Michael's feet. A data chip, classified Eleni evacuation routes. safe houses. Michael felt a jolt of adrenaline. Thorne was giving him a chance to run, but could he trust him? Was this a test, or a genuine act of defiance? He made his decision. Lyra's safety was paramount. He would trust Thorne's hint. He activated the lab's emergency lockdown, sealing them inside. The first step in an escape plan that was rapidly forming in his mind. Lyra turned her head, her improving vision struggling to focus. She looked from Thorne's retreating form to Michael's face, her eyes wide with a dawning understanding. She seemed to recognize them both, the Eleni and the human. She knew. Michael slipped the data chip into a reader built into his wrist console. The schematic shimmered into existence. A web of evacuation routes overlaid onto the facility's blueprints, each line color-coded based on risk, and the pulsing icon of the nearest safe house blinking insistently. Thorne had delivered. Now came the hard part. He moved quickly, grabbing a compact medical kit from a wall-mounted dispenser, synth skin patches, nutrient injectors, analgesic spray. Next, he located a sealed container of nutrient paste, bland but sustaining, and a modified sensor device, repurposed from atmospheric analysis, that now pinged with the distinctive energy signature of Eleni weaponry. Kneeling before Lyra, Michael held out the nutrient paste. "Okay, kiddo, time for a snack. We're going on a little trip." He kept his voice light, but his gut twisted with a Dr. Eddie. "Dr. Thorne sent us a map. We're going to go visit some friends." Lyra took the tube hesitantly, her large violet eyes clouded with apprehension. "Scared," she whispered, the word muffled by the paste. "But you want to help." A metallic clang echoed through the facility, the unmistakable sound of transport ships docking. Red emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the lab in a crimson glow. A synthesized voice boomed, "Facility lockdown initiated. All personnel report to designated security checkpoints." Michael grabbed Lyra's hand. "Time to go. Ventilation shaft now." He hoisted her onto his back, her small body surprisingly light, and sprinted towards the access panel hidden behind a deactivated diagnostic console. The air grew thick with tension, the hum of the facility replaced by the ominous thud of approaching footsteps. He squeezed through the narrow opening, the metal grating cold against his skin, and pulled Lyra in after him. The ventilation shaft was a cramped, twisting tunnel, barely wide enough for him to crawl through. Dust motes danced in the dim emergency lighting, and the air hung heavy with the scent of stale ozone. He pressed forward, Lyra clinging tightly to his back. Suddenly, Lyra stiffened. He felt a series of rapid clicks vibrate through her body, against his back. "Map," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the whirring of the ventilation fans. "Tunnel, turns left, then right, then big drop, thin metal." Michael paused, impressed. "You're mapping this with sound." Her answering clicks were affirmative, like "see with sound." Meanwhile, in the central control room, the lead Eleni commander, his face a mask of cold orthodoxy, stood before Dr. Thorne. "Where is the human, Walker? His research is of utmost importance." Thorne met the commander's gaze, his expression carefully neutral. "He's working in a remote section, Commander. Lab Sector Gamma 7, I believe. I wasn't aware a lockdown was necessary." He feigned surprise, a subtle tremor in his voice betraying his unease. Back in the ventilation shaft, Michael pressed his ear against the metal wall. The distinct thud of Eleni boots echoed nearby, growing closer with each passing second. Lyra clicked again, urgently. "Patrol, close, 3, weapons." Michael cursed under his breath. He pulled a small device from his belt, a sonic emitter tuned to resonate with the facility's internal structure. Aiming it at a nearby lab, he triggered a minor power surge, causing lights to flicker and equipment to sputter. A shout echoed down the corridor. "Report! What's happening in Lab Sector Beta 4? The sound of boots receded as the patrol rushed to investigate. "Let's go," Michael muttered, pushing forward. He reached a junction and dropped down into a narrow service tunnel, the darkness swallowing them whole. Lyra whimpered, clutching at his shirt. "Dark, can't see." Michael sighed. He shifted her weight, adjusting her on his back. "All right, hop on tight. I'll carry you for a bit." He began to walk, his hands outstretched, feeling his way along the cold, damp walls. In the control room, Thorne subtly manipulated the facility's sensor grid, rerouting power and creating blind spots in the internal monitoring system. He could only buy them a few minutes, but every second counted. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the tunnel, the telltale sound of an Eleni drone. Michael froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He ripped open the medical kit and pulled out a thermal blanket, wrapping it tightly around himself and Lyra. The drone buzzed past, its sensors unable to penetrate the blanket's shielding. As the drone's whine faded, Lyra tensed again. "Something," she whispered, her voice permeated with fear. "Not Eleni, not human." Ahead in the darkness, a hulking shape began to materialize. It was a maintenance droid, its metallic body dented and scarred, its optical sensors flickering erratically. It lurched forward, its metallic limbs twitching, emitting a series of garbled static noises. The droid swung a heavy wrench, the metal whistling through the air. Michael shoved Lyra behind him, barely dodging the blow. The wrench slammed into the tunnel wall, showering them with sparks. Their escape route was now blocked. In the security control room, Thorne watched the scene unfold on a grainy monitor, his face etched with horror. He knew that droid. He had programmed it. What he didn't know was why it was malfunctioning. The security droid, a hulking sentinel of polished chrome and lethal intent, spasmed erratically. Its repulsor lifts whined, threatening to give out at any moment, sending it crashing down. Michael wrestled with the access panel, his fingers flying across the unfamiliar Eleni script. Sparks spat from a severed wire, stinging his hand. "Damn it." "The energy regulator," Lyra whispered, her ears twitching. "It's on the lower left quadrant, bypass it." He trusted her. Blind as she was, her hearing was becoming a sixth sense in this lightless maze. Michael located the regulator, a small, pulsating cube, and with a grunt ripped it free. The droid shuddered, its limbs locking into place. Silence descended, thick and heavy. Too heavy. "Patrols," Lyra hissed, her head tilted. 3 of them, approaching fast. A flicker of movement on a nearby monitor confirmed her words. 3 blips were converging on their location. Back in the control room, Aris Thorne watched the situation unfold on his own console. He saw the patrol routes closing in. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He brought up the droid control system and with a swift series of commands overrode the local network. One by one, the droid signatures vanished from the sector map. He was betting everything. On the patrol route, the Eleni commander paused, his brow ridges furrowed. "Report," he barked into his comm. "Droid activity has ceased in Sector Gamma 7. Explain." The response was a garbled mess of static. Suspicion coiled in his gut, cold and sharp. Michael grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her into a narrow alcove carved into the tunnel wall. The patrol marched past, their heavy footfalls echoing in the confined space. The air vibrated with their presence. Michael held his breath, willing them to move on. Once the patrol had passed, Lyra spoke, her voice barely audible. "This tunnel, it sings." Michael frowned. "Sings?" "The walls," she explained, her fingers tracing the rough surface. "They have different textures, different densities. They create echoes like a map. I can hear the whole tunnel system." He stared at her, a dawning realization in his eyes. "You can navigate us out of here." She nodded, a flicker of confidence in her expression. "I can try." For the next hour they moved through the tunnels, guided by Lyra's acute hearing. She led him through a labyrinth of twisting passages, bypassing patrol routes with uncanny accuracy. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone and decay. Finally, she stopped before a narrow opening. "This way," she whispered. They squeezed through the opening and found themselves in a small, circular chamber. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through a crack in the ceiling. Old research equipment lay scattered about, covered in a thick layer of grime. Michael spotted a discarded Eleni datapad on a rusted console. He picked it up, brushing off the dust. Anything. Lyra wrinkled her nose. Ancient, she said. The datapad smells ancient. He activated the datapad. A series of fragmented images flickered across the screen depicting early Eleni genetic experiments. Schematics, diagrams, and handwritten notes filled the display. He swiped through the files, his eyes scanning the alien script. Then he found it. A project focused on enhancing sensory perception. A project that failed spectacularly. They tried to create enhanced senses, Michael murmured, his voice tinged with disbelief. But it didn't work. It caused blindness. He looked at Lyra, his mind racing. Could her blindness be a result of these early experiments? Had the Eleni unknowingly enhanced her hearing while trying to give her sight? A coded message flashed across his comm unit. It was Thorn, increased surveillance. Safe house compromised. Damn it. They were running out of time. He looked around the chamber, seeking another escape route. There, Lyra said suddenly, her head cocked to one side. I smell something else. Eleni? No, she replied. Not Eleni, not human, familiar, but different. A low growl echoed from the darkness beyond the chamber. A figure emerged from the shadows, its form hulking and indistinct. It stepped into the light, revealing itself to be another Eleni cub. But this one was different. Larger, more muscular, with glowing, bioluminescent markings on its skin. The enhanced cub turned its head, fixing Lyra with an intense stare. A voice echoed in Michael's mind, clear as a bell but unspoken. Sister. Michael gasped, stumbling backward. He was the only one who could see the enhanced cub's mouth hadn't moved. Its name is Rel, Lyra finished, her brow furrowed in concentration. It says, it wants to help us escape. Michael's eyes hardened. Help us. An enhanced Eleni cub just happens to want to help us. I don't buy it. He scanned the tunnel, his hand instinctively moving towards his sidearm, though he knew it was useless against the Eleni stun weapons. It's a trap. Lyra's voice, still tinged with Rel's telepathic echoes, rose slightly. No, it's not, it says. It was abandoned too. For being too strong, they deemed it a threat. Michael scoffed. Right, too strong. And now it's our benevolent savior. It shares our experience, Lyra insisted, her voice firm. The prejudice, the abandonment, it understands. Michael turned away, his gaze hardening. Understanding doesn't mean trustworthiness. I've trusted the wrong people before. Sarah's face flashed in his mind. Her bright smile, the way she used to tilt her head when she listened, the betrayal in her eyes when he told her he couldn't stay, that his work was more important. He clenched his fists. Lyra reached out, her small hand finding his arm. Rel, it says it feels your pain, but it also says you have a good heart, Michael. It believes in you. He looked down at her, at the unwavering trust in her unseeing eyes. He saw a reflection of his sister's unwavering faith in him before the darkness took her sight. He sighed, the fight draining out of him. Fine, he conceded, his voice rough. We'll hear it out, but one wrong move. Rel knows the patrol patterns of the guards outside, Lyra relayed, her voice regaining its focus. It says they rotate every 15 cycles. 2 guards at the main entrance, another patrolling the perimeter. Michael pulled out his datapad, accessing the sensor logs he'd managed to download before leaving the lab. He cross-referenced Rel's information. The patrol times, the guard placements. It was all accurate. A flicker of something akin to hope ignited within him, battling the ever-present cynicism. All right, he muttered, grudgingly impressed. What else? There's a hidden passage, Lyra said, her voice growing stronger as she channeled Rel's thoughts. Behind a collapsed section of the tunnel wall just past the next junction. It leads to a ventilation shaft. They moved cautiously, Michael leading the way, his senses on high alert. At the junction, he spotted the collapsed section Lyra had described. It looked like a natural cave-in, easily overlooked. Rel was right. These tunnels. Lyra continued, Rel says they were built by a species that disappeared long ago. They have unique energy signatures different from the Eleni. He ran a quick scan with his datapad. The energy readings were faint, almost imperceptible, but definitely anomalous. The air felt different here, colder, older. The ventilation shaft leads to an abandoned research lab, Lyra explained. That's what Rel says. Michael stopped. I'm going to scout ahead. Stay here with Rel. He didn't wait for a response, turning and disappearing into the darkness. Rel, through Lyra, expressed agitation at his departure, a low, guttural whine resonating in her mind. The lab was eerily silent, dust motes dancing in the faint emergency lighting. Michael moved slowly, his boots crunching on the debris-strewn floor. He reached a door panel, covered in intricate Eleni glyphs. He ran his fingers over them, trying to decipher the access code. Misreading a subtle variation, he triggered a silent alarm. A barely audible hum vibrated through the walls. He cursed under his breath, turning and sprinting back towards the ventilation shaft. We need to go now, he hissed, grabbing Lyra's arm and pulling her towards the passage. Even as he spoke, the telltale hum of approaching stun weapons echoed through the tunnel. Eleni guards were converging on their position. Their escape route was cut off. A roar, impossibly loud for a cub, reverberated through the tunnel. Rel, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light, slammed its shoulder against a section of the ventilation shaft wall. The metal buckled, then ripped open, creating a new, albeit narrow, passage. Go, go, Michael yelled, shoving Lyra forward. He followed close behind, adrenaline surging through his veins. Stun blasts whizzed past them, scorching the tunnel walls. Lyra, her brow furrowed in concentration, began to move with surprising speed and assurance. Left, obstacle ahead, right, another guard. Her echolocation, honed by her blindness, was guiding them through the maze of tunnels. They reached a dead end. A solid rock wall blocked their path. There's a doorway, Lyra said, her voice strained. Hidden. Rel says it's accessible only by manipulating a sequence of energy nodes. But it's too high. Rel can't reach. Michael cursed under his breath, his fingers dancing across the cold, metallic surface of the energy nodes. They pulsed with an alien luminescence, a sickly green that seemed to vibrate in his vision. He could feel the hum of energy beneath his fingertips, a complex thrum that defied human understanding. These nodes were the key, but the sequence. It was maddeningly intricate. Rel knows the sequence, Lyra's thought echoed in his mind, a fragile bridge across the species divide. It cannot reach the nodes itself. Michael scoffed inwardly. A disembodied intelligence claiming to know the activation sequence for ancient Eleni technology. It was absurd. Still, Lyra hadn't lied yet. Are you sure about this, Lyra, this thing? Rel, it actually knows the sequence. He kept his voice low, barely a whisper above the drone of the tunnel. Lyra winced, her brow furrowing. Rel perceives the energy flows within the nodes, Michael. It sees patterns I cannot. It is different. He hesitated, his gaze flickering between the nodes and Lyra's trusting face. Different good or different bad. He hated relying on an unknown, especially now. But time was running out. He could feel it, the vibration in the floor growing stronger, the air thickening with anticipation. All right, he conceded, his voice tight with apprehension. Let's try it. You relay Rel's instructions, I input them. He positioned his fingers on the nodes, ready to move. Lyra closed her eyes, her face drawn with concentration. The tunnel shook again, harder this time, dust raining down from the ceiling. The metallic clang of Eleni boots echoed in the distance, growing closer with each passing second. Now, Michael, Lyra said, her voice strained. Node 3, pulse frequency 7, then Node 1, amplitude 5. Michael followed her instructions, his heart hammering against his ribs. He pressed the third node, modulating the frequency as precisely as he could. Then he moved to the first, adjusting the amplitude. But as he reached for the second node, he hesitated. Something felt wrong. He glanced at Lyra, seeking confirmation, but her face was a mask of concentration. He input the step anyway. A blinding flash erupted from the nodes, followed by a high-pitched whine that resonated deep within his skull. The air crackled with energy, the smell of ozone filling his nostrils. Lyra cried out, a sharp, animalistic sound of pure agony. She clutched her head, stumbling backward. Too high the frequency. Too high. Her echolocation, her lifeline, was useless, overwhelmed by the feedback. Michael swore, his face burning with shame. Lyra, I'm sorry, I messed up. Can you still focus? He reached for her, his hand hovering over her shoulder. Rel, give me the revised sequence. Now, Lyra gasped, her body trembling. Node 3, pulse frequency 3. Node 1, amplitude 5. Node 2, decay rate 8. Rel's instructions came in fragmented bursts, each word a struggle. Michael repeated the sequence, his movements faster, more precise this time. The metallic clang of the Eleni guards was almost deafening now, punctuated by the crackle of energy weapons. He could hear their distorted commands, their voices echoing through the tunnel. Node 4. Resonance 12. Final node, harmonic 7. Activate. He slammed his hand down on the final node, his muscles screaming with exertion. A surge of power coursed through the tunnel, the air shimmering with distorted light. Then, with a grinding groan of ancient machinery, a section of the wall slid inward, revealing a dark, gaping passage. Move now. Michael shouted, grabbing Lyra's arm and dragging her toward the opening. As they scrambled through the doorway, stun blasts slammed into the walls around them, showering them with pulverized rock and sparking metal. Lyra cried out again, her foot catching on a loose cable. She twisted, her body crumpling to the ground. Pain shot through her leg. Lyra. Michael dropped to his knees beside her, his face etched with concern. Go, leave me, she protested, her voice choked with pain. I'll only slow you down. He ignored her pleas. He scooped her up into his arms, cradling her against his chest. Not a chance, he growled, his voice tight with perseverance. I'm not leaving you behind. He staggered through the darkness, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Rel's voice echoed in Lyra's mind and then in Michael's, guiding them deeper into the passage. This way. The chamber ahead is clear. For now, the passage opened into a vast, cavernous chamber. Deactivated machinery loomed in the shadows, their surfaces coated in dust and decay. The air hung heavy with the scent of ozone and forgotten technology. The hidden doorway slammed shut behind them with a deafening crash, plunging them into near-total darkness. The door requires a separate activation code from within, Rel transmitted, its voice tinged with a hint of something Michael couldn't quite decipher. Was that concern? He gently lowered Lyra to the ground, his fingers probing her injured leg. It's just a sprain, I think. Nothing's broken. He ripped a strip of cloth from the bottom of his shirt, wincing as he tore the fabric. He wrapped it tightly around her ankle, creating a makeshift bandage. Lyra closed her eyes, focusing her senses. The lab is vast, Michael, filled with equipment and potential dangers, but I sense an unusual energy signature nearby. Michael tightened the bandage, securing the makeshift splint of plasteel scraps and torn fabric around Lyra's ankle. She winced, her crystalline fur jam packed slightly. Thank you, Michael. Her voice, though soft, held a tremor of anxiety. But they will be coming. We cannot stay here. We won't, Michael assured her, his gaze sweeping across the cavernous chamber. This will hold for now. We just need to find another way out. He paused, his hand instinctively reaching for the discarded plasma pistol at his hip. Which way, Lyra, can you see anything? Lyra closed her eyes, focusing. A faint clicking sound emanated from her throat, inaudible to human ears but painting a sonic picture in her mind. The chamber. It is vast, she whispered, her head tilting slightly as she processed the returning echoes. Filled with inactive machinery, hollow, cold. She paused, a flicker of confusion in her unseeing eyes. But there is something else. A signature, energy. Strange, deeper within. Michael frowned. Rel's words echoed in his mind. This lab holds secrets the High Council would rather keep buried. Energy signature, huh? Lead the way, Lyra. Let's see what secrets this place is hiding. They moved cautiously through the chamber, Lyra guiding Michael with her echolocation. Deactivated robotic arms lay scattered across the floor, their metallic limbs twisted and broken. Disassembled medical equipment, gleaming chrome tools, and shattered biocontainment units hinted at the lab's original purpose, a purpose long abandoned. More sentinels, Lyra murmured, her voice barely audible above the hum of the facility. Non-functional, deactivated. Michael followed her gaze, spotting the hulking shapes of robotic sentinels positioned at intervals throughout the chamber. Their designs were clearly Eleni, but ancient, outdated models, their polished surfaces dulled with grime and disuse. He knelt beside one, running a hand over its cold, metallic casing. These haven't been active in cycles. They're relics. He noticed a broken data terminal nearby, its screen cracked and dark. He tried to activate it, but the console remained stubbornly unresponsive. Power failure, he muttered in frustration. Just our luck. The signature. It is changing, Lyra said, her voice gaining urgency. A pulse, a faint rhythm, emanating from further ahead. They pressed on, reaching a vast chamber dominated by a central platform. Upon it sat a device unlike anything Michael had ever seen. Wires snaked across its surface, connecting to a network of tubes filled with viscous, luminescent fluid. The energy. It is strongest here, Lyra breathed, her fur practically standing on end. I feel a vibration, a faint humming through the floor. Michael cautiously approached the device, his eyes scanning its intricate details. Strange symbols adorned its surface, unlike the familiar geometric patterns of standard Eleni script. These were older, more complex, almost organic. There is a disruption, Lyra said, her voice strained. Around the device, my senses are clouded, shielded. Driven by an irresistible curiosity, Michael reached out and touched the device. A sharp jolt of energy surged through him, making him gasp. The device shuddered, and a network of lights flickered to life, bathing the chamber in an ethereal glow, briefly illuminating the intricate details of the room. In that moment, Lyra gasped, clutching her head. I felt something, she stammered, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and wonder. A connection, a mind through the device, but it broke. Michael stared at the device, his mind racing. A connection, a mind. This isn't just some research tool, it's a communication device or some kind of portal technology. He paused, his eyes narrowing. Something old. Something the Eleni wanted to keep hidden. A low, grinding sound echoed through the chamber. Lyra stiffened, her ears twitching. Michael, she whispered, her voice infused with terror. Behind us. I sense movement. One of the sentinels. It is activating. The metallic fist slammed into the console where Michael had been standing a moment before, showering the area with sparks. He rolled, the acrid smell of ozone stinging his nostrils. The robotic sentinel, a relic of some long-forgotten Eleni garrison, was slow, its movements jerky and imprecise, but its sheer strength was terrifying. Each footfall resonated through the chamber like a death knell. Michael scrambled behind a stack of discarded equipment, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Its targeting system was clearly outdated, reliant on visual input that struggled in the lab's dim lighting. He spotted a pile of broken consoles, twisted metal, and shattered glass. A desperate idea sparked in his mind. He hurled a handful of debris at the sentinel. The shattered glass tinkled against its armored plating, momentarily distracting it. Lyra, now. He yelled, hoping she could hear him over the din. A voice, clear and precise, echoed in his mind. Its left leg near the joint. The power cables are exposed, frayed. Hit them there. Michael grabbed a jagged piece of plasteel, its edge honed to a razor sharpness from some unknown accident. He risked a glance. The sentinel was lumbering toward the pile of debris, its optical sensors whirring erratically. He charged, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He slid under the sentinel's massive frame, the air thick with the smell of oil and decay. He slashed upwards, aiming for the exposed cables. A shower of sparks erupted as the plasteel severed the power cables. The sentinel shuddered, its movements faltering. With a final, grinding groan, it collapsed, its metallic limbs twitching spasmodically. Michael, breathing heavily, pushed himself to his feet. "Thanks, kiddo. You saved my skin." He turned back to the device. Lyra was still near it, her posture relaxed, her breathing even. He could sense her focus, a gentle hum resonating from her. The device seemed to hum in response, the energy output noticeably more stable. He approached the device cautiously, running his hand over its smooth, cold surface. It was covered in intricate symbols, a language he didn't immediately recognize. He needed a systematic approach. He began tracing the wiring with his fingers, mapping its complex network. "There's a pattern," Lyra's voice echoed in his mind, clearer now. "Inside, the energy flows in a spiral like a galaxy, and the symbols, they resonate with the energy." She was creating a detailed image of the device's internal structure using her echolocation, relaying the information to him in real time. It was an alien form of MRI, incredibly precise and detailed. He studied the symbols, comparing them to the internal structure Lyra was providing. Suddenly, recognition sparked in his mind. It was a dialect, a highly specialized form of Eleni engineering principles related to subspace manipulation. He had encountered it once before, during his research on faster-than-light communication. The key to stabilizing the device's power output was hidden in the symbols and their relationship to the internal wiring. He carefully input a sequence into the device, based on his understanding of the symbols and Lyra's structural analysis. Each touch of his fingers on the alien interface felt like a gamble, a step into the unknown. The device hummed louder, then responded. A holographic display flickered to life, projecting a series of images into the chamber. The images depicted scenes of an ancient Eleni civilization, a society far more advanced than anything he had ever imagined. Gleaming cities soared into the sky, powered by clean energy. Sleek spacecraft traversed the stars. The Eleni in their prime were explorers, scientists, dreamers. The images shifted, becoming darker, more chaotic. A catastrophic event unfolded before his eyes. Explosions ripped through the cities. The skies turned black with smoke. The Eleni were at war, or perhaps battling a natural disaster of unimaginable scale. Lyra suddenly cried out, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the air. She clutched her head, her body trembling violently. "Lyra." "What's wrong?" Michael rushed to her side, his heart pounding in his chest. I see them," she gasped, her voice filled with terror. "The Ancient Ones. They're trying to escape. They're using the device as a door." She was experiencing a flood of memories and emotions, not her own, but echoes of the ancient Eleni who had built the device. The holographic display flickered and shifted again, revealing a map of the galaxy. Several locations were highlighted, bathed in an eerie green light. One of them was Earth. The device emitted a pulse of energy, a wave of pure force that washed over the chamber. Lyra screamed, her senses overloaded. She collapsed, her body limp in Michael's arms. He caught her, cradling her gently. Her breathing was shallow, her skin clammy. But as he held her, he noticed something different, her echolocation. It was more refined, more powerful. He could feel it, a gentle wave of perception emanating from her, mapping the chamber with incredible precision. A faint energy signature flickered on his scanner near the deactivated robotic sentinels. He glanced over. Their optical sensors were glowing red. They were reactivating. He stared at the device, then at Lyra, then back at the reactivating sentinels. The device wasn't just a communication tool, a relic of a lost civilization. It was a beacon, and the Eleni, they were coming. The robotic sentinels fully reactivated, their movements now stilted and abrupt, a stark contrast to their previous fluid patrols. A high-pitched whine emanated from their joints as they rotated, their optical sensors glowing a menacing red. scanning the lab with newfound purpose. Michael's eyes darted between the sentinels, his mind already dissecting their altered behavior. "They're controlling them remotely now," he muttered, his voice tight with urgency. "No more patrol routes, just directives." He ripped open a control panel on a discarded console, sparks flying as he tore out wires and components. "Gotta fry their circuits, give us some breathing room." He worked with a frantic precision, stripping wires, rerouting power conduits and cannibalizing capacitors. Come on," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead as he assembled a crude, makeshift EMP device. Lyra focused, her brow furrowed in concentration. A faint tremor ran through her body as she strained to perceive the sentinels through echolocation. "The joints," she stammered, her voice strained. "The energy. It flows differently. There are gaps, smaller, near the power cells." Michael didn't hesitate. He grabbed the EMP, a tangle of wires and exposed circuits, and dashed towards the nearest sentinel. He slammed the device against its chassis, a blinding flash erupting as the EMP discharged. The sentinel shuddered, its movement ceasing before it crashed to the floor, inert. The other sentinel followed moments later. He returned to the holographic display, his gaze intense as he traced the highlighted locations. "It's not random," he realized, his voice hardening. "They're strategically important, all pointing back to Elian Prime." He calculated the distance, the speed of a typical Eleni vessel. 12 hours, they'll be here in 12 hours. Lyra cried out, clutching her head. Images flashed behind her eyelids, sleek obsidian ships dripping with energy weapons, Eleni soldiers in gleaming armor. The ship, weapons, so bright. She gasped, her voice filled with terror. Michael, his face grim, began dragging scrap metal and discarded equipment towards the main entrance. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice resolute. "Let's make this place a fortress." He welded metal plates over windows, reinforcing the doors with energy shields scavenged from the disabled sentinels. He rerouted power from non-essential systems, diverting every available watt to the shields. "It's a temporary fix," he admitted, his voice tight. "But it might buy us a few precious minutes." Lyra, despite her fear, pushed herself to focus. She extended her echolocation, trying to see beyond the lab's walls, visualizing the surrounding forest, the contours of the mountains in the distance. Michael worked feverishly, modifying the EMP device, adding a proximity trigger. "Last resort," he said grimly, his face illuminated by the flickering light. "If they try to breach the perimeter." Suddenly, Lyra stiffened. "Something's coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Small, fast, energy signature." A streak of light pierced the atmosphere, descending rapidly towards the lab. It was a reconnaissance probe, launched from the Eleni vessel, sent to test their defenses. Michael grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her behind a reinforced console. "Here it comes," he said, his voice low and steady. The probe unleashed a concentrated energy blast, slamming into the lab's shields. The lights flickered violently, the air crackling with ozone. "They're analyzing us," Michael realized, his eyes narrowed, "finding our weaknesses." Lyra sensed a subtle shift in the Eleni vessel's trajectory. "They're changing course," she whispered, "adjusting, based on what the probe found." Michael armed the proximity mine, setting the trigger. "If they get close enough to touch this lab," he said, his voice hard, "they're going to regret it." He looked at Lyra, his expression a mixture of drive and concern. "We'll face this together," he said quietly. High above, the Eleni vessel entered Earth's orbit, preparing for its descent towards the isolated lab. The Eleni vessel began its descent, the gravitic engines screaming as they fought the planet's pull. The lab shuddered, a low, resonant vibration that amplified into a violent shaking, rattling equipment and throwing loose tools to the floor. Michael grabbed Lyra, pulling her close as a warning klaxon blared, its shrill cry cutting through the mechanical din. Outside, the ground trembled as rapid descent pods detached from the mothership, each a metallic dart plunging toward the surface. Impacts echoed, a staccato drumbeat signaling the deployment of the Eleni ground forces. Energy crackled. The lab's makeshift energy shields flickered, absorbing the initial barrage of Eleni energy weapons. Violet light washed through the reinforced windows, followed by the sharp, acrid smell of ozone as the shield strained, then buckled. A high-pitched whine signaled overload. One by one, the shields died, leaving only the plasteel walls as the last line of defense. "Inner lab now," Michael shouted, shoving Lyra ahead of him. He grabbed his pulse rifle, its weight familiar and comforting in his hands. They retreated to the inner lab chambers, a warren of interconnected rooms dedicated to research and experimentation. Michael sealed the blast doors behind them, the heavy locks engaging with a satisfying thunk. But he knew it wouldn't hold for long. The Eleni wouldn't be deterred by simple barriers. A faint, high-frequency whine, almost imperceptible to human ears, filled the room. Michael frowned. "Drones," Lyra whispered, her head tilted slightly. "Small. Surveillance, 3 of them above, near the ventilation ducts." Her voice was calm, focused, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Michael raised his rifle, aiming at the ceiling. He fired a short burst, the pulse rounds ripping through the metal ductwork. 2 of the drones sputtered and fell, sparking and smoking. The third darted away, its optical sensor glowing red. More were coming. He could hear them, a swarm of mechanical insects buzzing through the lab. "They're heading for the main power generator," Lyra said, her brow furrowed. "West wing, if it fails." Everything goes dark. Michael cursed under his breath. No power meant no life support, no lights, no chance. He had to buy time. "Booby traps," he muttered, grabbing a handful of energy cells and some spare wiring. "Hold them back just for a few minutes." He moved quickly, setting up a series of improvised explosives along the main corridor leading to the generator room. Tripwires, pressure plates, anything to slow the Eleni advance. Another memory flash, this one stronger, more vivid. Lyra gasped, clutching her head. "Armor, Eleni armor." She stammered, the arm, the joint, vulnerable. Michael stopped, his mind racing. A weak point in the Eleni armor, that could change everything. "Show me," he said, his voice urgent. Lyra focused, picturing the image in her mind. The elbow joint, a gap in the plating, energy weapons, concentrated, could penetrate. He grabbed a spare energy cell, splicing it into his rifle's power core. The weapon hummed, drawing more energy, its output intensifying. It was a risky modification, potentially overloading the rifle, but it was their only chance. He aimed down the corridor, waiting. The first Eleni soldier rounded the corner, its iridescent armor gleaming under the emergency lights. Michael fired. A concentrated beam of energy lanced out, striking the soldier's elbow joint. The armor buckled, sparking violently. The soldier staggered, its weapon clattering to the floor. It was down, but the burst of energy had attracted attention. More Eleni were on their way, their footsteps echoing through the lab. They breached the inner lab, weapons raised. Close combat. Michael fired again, hitting another soldier, but he was quickly overwhelmed. The Eleni were relentless, their movements precise and deadly. Lyra screamed, a high-pitched sonic blast that resonated through the room. The Eleni staggered, momentarily disoriented. Michael grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her towards a hidden panel in the wall. "Emergency exit," he grunted, shoving the panel open. "Let's go." They scrambled through the narrow passage, emerging into the moon's desolate wilderness. The lab loomed behind them, a beacon in the darkness, but not for long. Above, the Eleni vessel hung in the sky, a silent predator. Scout drones detached, their sensors sweeping the landscape. A small pursuit team disembarked, their thermal vision piercing the shadows. They were coming. Inside the lab, the power generator overloaded. A final, agonizing whine followed by a deafening explosion. The lights flickered, then died. The lab plunged into darkness. They burst from the emergency exit, the door hissing shut behind them. The air hung thick and heavy, saturated with the scent of damp earth and unknown vegetation. Towering trees, their canopies interwoven like a living roof, choked out the starlight, casting the forest floor in near-total darkness. Michael felt the chill immediately, a stark contrast to the sterile warmth of the research facility. "Ravine ahead," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. "Steep drop, jagged rocks." Her head tilted slightly as she processed the returning echoes. About 50 meters, downward slope, loose soil. Michael swore silently, pulling up his wrist display. The screen flickered erratically. Energy cells almost drained. Damn it. He tapped the side of the device, but the power indicator remained stubbornly low. Limited rations, a half-charged weapon, and now this. He glanced at Lyra, her silver fur barely visible in the gloom. He couldn't afford to dwell on the odds. A high-pitched whine sliced through the night. Michael looked up. 2 Eleni drones, their crimson eyes scanning the forest perimeter, hovered into view. They had heat signatures locked. No time. "Hold on," Michael muttered, pulling a small explosive charge from his belt. He set the timer for 5 seconds and tossed it away from their intended path, towards a dense thicket of glowing fungi. The explosion ripped through the undergrowth, sending a shower of sparks and debris into the air. The drones swiveled, their attention momentarily diverted. "Now," Michael urged, grabbing Lyra's hand, "down the ravine." The descent was treacherous. Loose soil crumbled beneath their feet, sending small avalanches of dirt and pebbles tumbling into the abyss. Lyra's echolocation was their only guide, painting a picture of the unseen landscape in her mind. "Careful," she warned, her grip tightening on his hand. "Sharp drop to the left. Large rock." They reached the ravine floor, the air growing noticeably warmer. A thick carpet of phosphorescent moss covered the ground, casting an eerie green glow that illuminated the surroundings. The moss pulsed with a faint, internal light, giving the ravine an otherworldly quality. Above them, Michael heard the distinct crunch of boots on loose rock. The Eleni were descending. He cursed under his breath. They were relentless. Lyra stiffened. "They're close and..." She hesitated. "The moss. It's reacting to their energy weapons." Michael knelt, examining the moss more closely. He pulled out his energy rifle. A faint hum emanated from the weapon as it charged. He fired a quick burst at the moss. The effect was immediate and violent. The moss erupted in a blinding flash of light and a concussive wave of energy, leaving a smoking crater in its wake. "Damn," Michael said. "It's like a minefield." He started disassembling his weapon. Kinetic rounds only, no energy. He worked quickly, replacing the energy cells with a magazine of solid projectiles. This will have to do. The first Eleni soldiers reached the ravine floor. A volley of energy bolts ripped through the air, detonating the moss in a series of chain reactions. The explosion sent shockwaves through the ravine, showering the Eleni with burning debris. Several soldiers cried out in pain as they were engulfed in the phosphorescent flames. "Fall back," a voice shouted in Eleni. "The environment is too unstable." "Negative," a second voice, colder and more resolute, countered. "The High Council's orders are clear. Retrieve the subject. Eliminate all threats." Michael pulled Lyra behind a large rock outcropping. "They're not giving up," he said grimly. "We need to keep moving." Further down the ravine, he could hear the sound of rushing water. "River ahead," Lyra confirmed. "Fast flowing." But the river wasn't their only problem. "Thermal signatures," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with fear. "Ahead, a pack of them, large. Predators, wonderful." Michael rummaged through his pack, pulling out a small container of flammable gel and a makeshift igniter. He squeezed the gel onto several branches, creating makeshift torches. He ignited them, the flames casting flickering shadows on the moss-covered walls. "Stay close," he said, handing a torch to Lyra, "and be ready to run." Above them, the Eleni continued their slow and cautious descent, their progress hampered by the darkness and the treacherous terrain. The intermittent explosions of the moss served as a constant reminder of the danger they faced. Michael and Lyra reached the riverbank. The water was dark and churning, its surface reflecting the eerie green glow of the moss. He could feel the spray on his face, cold and invigorating. "The current is strong," Lyra said, her voice barely audible above the roar of the water. "But it will mask our scent." Without hesitation, Michael stepped into the river, pulling Lyra along with him. The water was shockingly cold, numbing his skin almost instantly. They waded into the current, the water rising to their waists. As they reached the middle of the river, Michael heard the familiar whine of the Alini drones overhead. They had reacquired their position. "They see us," Lyra said, her voice tight with apprehension. On the riverbank, the Alini ground team emerged from the darkness, their weapons trained on Michael and Lyra. The final confrontation was at hand. The ambush erupted the moment their boots hit solid ground. A searing blue bolt vaporized the tree beside them, showering them in splinters and the acrid smell of ionized air. "Down!" Michael yelled, shoving Lyra behind the meager cover of a fallen log. The Alini were fast, too fast. He scrabbled in his scavenged pack, fingers brushing against the cool metal casing. His heart hammered against his ribs. It had to work. He'd cobbled it together from a discarded stun grenade and some volatile chemicals he'd found in the abandoned research station. A desperate gamble. He primed the flashbang, yanked the pin, and tossed it over the log. A deafening crack followed by an eruption of blinding white light filled the clearing. The air crackled with ozone. He heard the high-pitched, disoriented screeches of the Alini. Their advanced optics were their weakness. "Now," he hissed, grabbing Lyra's hand. "Caves that way. Cave system, to the north." Narrow but traversable, Lyra's thought voice cut through the ringing in his ears. He trusted her. He had to. They plunged into the darkness, the air growing instantly cooler and damper. Water trickled down the slick rock walls. The only light came from the faint glow of the river behind them. A voice, cold and devoid of emotion, echoed from the Alini comms. "Sweep the area. Sector Gamma. Include the cave system. Disregard minimal safety protocols. Retrieve the target at all costs." Deeper they went, the darkness swallowing them whole. Then a faint, ethereal glow began to permeate the air. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls and ceiling, casting the cave in an eerie, pulsating light. The colors shifted from pale green to deep blue, distorting shapes and shadows, making it difficult to see. Something large. Ahead. Non-hostile, Lyra's message was filled with a strange curiosity. Michael drew his makeshift energy pistol, its power cell scavenged from a broken mining drone. He moved slowly, cautiously, his senses on high alert. The air grew thick with the earthy scent of damp soil and the sweet, cloying aroma of the fungi. Then he saw it. A colossal creature, easily 10 meters tall, stood grazing on the fungi. It was vaguely reptilian, with thick, leathery skin and 6 spindly legs that ended in broad, flat feet. Its head was small and triangular, with large, placid eyes. A grazer, herbivorous and generally docile. He extended a hand, palm open, a gesture of peace he'd learned from old nature documentaries. "Easy there," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. The grazer lifted its head, its large eyes focusing on him. It took a tentative step forward, then another, until it was close enough for Michael to feel its warm breath on his face. It lowered its head and nudged his hand with its snout, a sign of acceptance. A sudden flare of blue light announced the arrival of the Alini. Their energy weapons sliced through the darkness, illuminating the cave in a terrifying strobe. Behind it, Michael hissed, pulling Lyra behind the grazer's massive legs. The creature's thermal signature would mask theirs, hopefully buying them a few precious seconds. Water, falling, passage behind. Lyra's voice was urgent now. He could hear the Alini approaching, their footsteps echoing on the damp stone. The air crackled with the anticipation of energy weapons. "This way," he whispered, guiding Lyra towards the sound of rushing water. They squeezed past the grazer, the creature shifting slightly to give them room. A waterfall cascaded down the cave wall, creating a curtain of shimmering light. Behind it, barely visible, was a narrow opening. They plunged through the icy water, the force of the fall momentarily stealing their breath. On the other side, the passage opened into a vast cavern, larger than any they had seen before. Ruined structures dotted the landscape, their surfaces covered in moss and lichen. Intact arches and crumbling walls hinted at a civilization lost to time. Deactivated technology lay scattered among the ruins, silent and inert. Energy, faint but present. Coming from that structure, Lyra directed him towards a large, dome-shaped building in the center of the cavern. He approached cautiously, his energy pistol raised. The structure was made of a dark, obsidian-like material, its surface smooth and strangely warm to the touch. Inside, he found a partially functional control panel. Faint blue light flickered across its surface, illuminating complex schematic diagrams and indecipherable symbols. A searing blue blast ripped through the cavern, shattering the silence. The Eleni had found them. "They're here," he shouted, his voice echoing in the vast space. He frantically scanned the control panel, searching for anything that could help them. A large, red button caught his eye. A warning symbol flashed above it. He didn't have time to decipher it. He thumped his hand down on the button. A low hum filled the cavern, growing in intensity until it became a deafening roar. A wave of sonic energy pulsed outwards, washing over the Eleni. They crumpled to the ground, clutching their heads, incapacitated. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her deeper into the structure. They found themselves in a circular chamber. In the center, a large stasis pod hummed softly. Inside, a figure floated in suspended animation. Alive. Weak but alive, Lyra's thought was filled with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The dormant alien being hung suspended, a potential ally or a deadly threat, its fate and theirs intertwined in the depths of the forgotten cavern. The ringing in the commander's auditory receptors faded, replaced by the cold, precise calculations scrolling across his visor. Adaptive countermeasures, sonic dampening field deployed, breach team Alpha prepped for entry. Seal the perimeter, he voxed, his voice a low growl. And prepare a targeted energy pulse for grid coordinates. Mark. Michael swore under his breath, fingers tightening as he gripped the edge of the stasis pod. The alien script swam before his eyes, meaningless symbols mocking his efforts. Sweat trickled down his temples, stinging his eyes. The metal was cold, unnervingly smooth against his skin. Lyra's hand, small and surprisingly strong, rested on his arm. A series of rapid clicks and pops like static electricity filled the air around them, then abruptly stopped. Her brow furrowed. "They're blocking me," she whispered, her voice tight with strain. "Something. A wall of silence." Then her face contorted. A gasp escaped her lips, followed by a tremor that ran through her entire body. Visions flooded her mind, brutal and overwhelming. Cities consumed by fire, ships scattering like dust in a cosmic wind, the keening wail of a dying civilization. Loss so profound it felt like the universe itself was weeping. A desperate hope, clinging to the promise of survival, buried deep within the cold embrace of stasis. "War," she choked out, her voice barely audible. It was a war. They ran, they hid. The commander's voice boomed through the structure, amplified and distorted. "Breach in 10 cycles. Resistance is futile." Michael ripped a panel off a nearby console, sparks flying as he tore at the wires. "Damn it, Lyra, I need a thermal reading. Can you still sense anything?" Silence. Only the frantic thumping of Michael's heart filled the void. He worked feverishly, connecting wires, bypassing circuits, his movements a blur of desperate energy. He had no idea if it would work, but he had to try. Suddenly, a flicker of an image in his mind, a blueprint of sorts. A cylindrical component, intricately wired with a distinct energy signature, gone as quickly as it appeared. "What was that?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling. Another flicker, clearer this time. The same component, but with a sense of desperate urgency attached to it. Vital, power. Recognition slammed into Michael like a physical blow. A regulator, he breathed, his eyes widening. A power regulator like the ones they used on the Daedalus, the old Earth ship. Can you make one? Lyra asked, hope flickering in her voice. Maybe, Michael said, already stripping wires from the salvaged panel. But it'll take time, and it's a long shot, it's obsolete tech. We don't have time, Lyra countered, her voice hardening. We need to get out of here. That thing is a liability. It could be a weapon for the Eleni. Michael stopped, his hands hovering over the wires. He looked at Lyra, her face etched with worry, and then back at the stasis pod, at the shimmering form within. It's also a sentient being, Lyra, just like you, just like me. Sentient beings don't get us killed, she snapped. Maybe it can help us, Michael argued. Maybe it knows something. We can't just leave it to die. A beat of silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken fears and conflicting desires. Then Lyra sighed. Fine, she said, her voice resigned. But if this goes south, I'm blaming you. The structure shuddered. Alarms blared. The Eleni were inside. Michael worked faster, his fingers flying across the makeshift cloaking device. He activated it, and a faint shimmer distorted the air around them, masking their heat signatures. It wouldn't last long, but it might buy them some time. Power, Lyra whispered, her eyes fixed on the pod. It needs power, more power. Michael hesitated, then rerouted the remaining energy from the cloaking device to the stasis pod. The pod hummed, vibrating with increasing intensity. Lights flickered, casting dancing shadows across the chamber. The shimmering form within the pod began to coalesce, resolving into a vaguely humanoid shape. Then a voice echoed in their minds, faint but undeniable. Gratitude. Help. They seek. Code. Genetic. The lights flickered violently, then died, plunging the chamber into darkness. A surge of energy pulsed outwards, attracting the Eleni like moths to a flame. Run! Michael yelled, grabbing Lyra's hand. They stumbled through the darkness, the partially awakened alien a dead weight between them. They had to find a way out, a hidden passage, anything to escape the Eleni's relentless pursuit. A blinding flash of light erupted behind them, followed by a deafening roar. The structure groaned, metal screaming in protest. The commander's voice, distorted and triumphant, echoed through the chamber. Target eliminated. The ground beneath them buckled. Debris rained down from the ceiling. Cave in. Michael shielded Lyra with his body, bracing for the impact. Dust filled the air, choking them. When the dust settled, they were trapped, a wall of rubble separating them from the Eleni. But behind them, in the flickering light of a damaged power cell, Michael saw it. A narrow tunnel leading upwards towards the surface. He pushed aside a piece of debris, revealing the entrance. Freedom. He looked at the alien, its form still shimmering and indistinct, slumped against the stasis pod. It was too weak to move. Michael looked at Lyra, her face pale and streaked with dust. He knew what he had to do. Help me, he said, his voice hoarse. We're not leaving it behind. Michael and Lyra strained against the cold, slick walls, their boots slipping on the algae-covered stone. Alpha's bioluminescent hide pulsed a dim, rhythmic green, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with their every move. The tunnel, barely wide enough for Michael to fully extend his arms, pressed in on them, the weight of the mountain heavy above. Each groan of Alpha's massive frame echoed through the passage, a sound both reassuring and terrifying. A flicker, a whisper in the back of Michael's mind, not his own thoughts. Ancient, protectors, resource. The words, fragmented and tinged with a profound sadness, resonated from Alpha, bypassing sound, settling directly into his consciousness. A rush of images followed, towering structures, crystalline energy fields, and beings of pure light. Then, darkness. The tunnel opened abruptly into a vast, cathedral-like chamber. Twisted metal frameworks clawed at the darkness, remnants of colossal machines long since decayed. Strange, geometric symbols, etched in a metal that seemed to absorb all light, covered the walls. The air hummed with a low, persistent thrum, a ghostly echo of power. On the surface, the Eleni commander, his face a mask of steadfast perseverance, watched the readings on his wrist console. They've entered the secondary access tunnel. Deploy the Seekers. Adapt their sensor arrays for confined spaces. Michael ran a gloved hand over a shattered console, its surface cold and smooth. This place, it's incredible, but we don't have time to sightsee. He ripped a panel from a nearby wall, the sound of tearing metal loud in the oppressive silence. Lyra, help me find anything that can support Alpha. Lyra, her brow furrowed in concentration, reached out, her fingers tracing the air. There, metal, strong. She led Michael to a pile of twisted girders, their surfaces scarred and pitted. Working quickly, driven by adrenaline and a desperate hope, Michael began to assemble a makeshift exoskeleton. He welded struts to Alpha's massive legs, jury-rigging a system of pulleys and levers to distribute the weight more evenly. Sparks flew, illuminating their faces, highlighting the grime and exhaustion etched into their features. Lyra touched Alpha's flank, her small hand disappearing into the thick, leathery hide. Her face paled. He's fading. He needs energy, specific energy, like sunlight, but different. Alpha's telepathic voice, weaker now, flickered in Michael's mind. Heart of the mountain, source. Lyra gasped, her eyes wide though sightless. The symbols. They're not just decorations, they're instructions, a map. She moved to the wall, her fingers dancing over the strange glyphs. They speak of a dormant sun, buried deep. Michael followed her gaze, his eyes landing on a massive, cylindrical structure in the center of the chamber. It was covered in the same light-absorbing metal as the symbols, its surface cold and inert. That's it, isn't it? An energy generator of some kind. He approached it cautiously, his hand hovering over its surface. But how do we activate it? Lyra pressed her hand against the wall, her head tilted, listening with her entire being. The symbols, they shift, they change with the feeling, like a song. I can hear it, feel it, but I don't understand. The first Seeker drone, a sleek obsidian sphere filled with sensors, entered the chamber. Its optical array, adapted for low light conditions, scanned the environment, its processors filtering out the ambient energy signatures. Michael traced the contours of the generator with his fingers, his mind racing. Okay, Lyra, talk to me. What do you hear? What do you feel? Lyra closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. First, pressure, then release, a sequence, 3, 7, 2. Michael input the sequence into a corroded control panel on the side of the generator. Nothing. He tried again, reversing the order. Still nothing. The Seekers, their sensor arrays now fully calibrated, locked onto the thermal signatures of Michael, Lyra, and Alpha. Think, damn it, think. Michael smacked his palm against the control panel. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. Lyra's words echoed in his mind, pressure, release. He looked at the symbols again, seeing not just shapes, but patterns, rhythms. He pressed 3 symbols simultaneously, holding them down, applying pressure. Then he released them, quickly pressing 7, then 2. A low hum filled the chamber, growing in intensity. The generator began to vibrate, its surface glowing with a faint, internal light. A surge of energy pulsed through the air, making the hairs on Michael's arms stand on end. Alpha shuddered, his bioluminescence flaring brightly, then dimming slightly. The Eleni commander smiled grimly. They've activated the generator. Pinpoint their location. Prepare for immediate extraction. Thank you, but the Eleni, they do not seek domination. Alpha's voice was stronger but imbued with a new urgency. Plague, genetic, cure. Michael stared at Alpha, stunned. They're not trying to conquer us. They need something from you. He glanced at the generator, its energy output fluctuating wildly. This thing's unstable. It'll overload if we don't dampen it. He pointed to a rusted valve. But if we use the dampener, it'll weaken the energy flow. It might not be enough to save you. The Eleni commander deployed a sonic disruptor, its waves designed to destabilize the chamber's structural integrity. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls, dust raining down from the ceiling. Alpha groaned, his bioluminescence flickering erratically. Lyra placed her hand on Michael's arm, her voice trembling. If we use the generator at full power, it could heal him completely. But the surge, it would be massive. It could destroy the tunnel, trap us, and the Eleni. They would sense it immediately. Michael stared at the valve, then at Alpha, his face a mask of conflict. He had a choice: save Alpha, potentially sacrificing himself and Lyra, or dampen the energy, prolonging Alpha's suffering and the inevitable pursuit. The first Seeker drone rounded a corner, its weapons array locking onto their position. Red targeting lasers painted across Michael's chest. Michael's hand hovered over the dampener controls. Full restoration. The potential was intoxicating, but the risk, the potential for uncontrolled energy, for annihilation, was a cold fist clenching his gut. He glanced at Lyra, her multifaceted eyes wide with a trust he didn't deserve. He couldn't gamble, not with her life. "We're going with the dampener," he said, his voice tight. "Safer is better." He didn't wait for Alpha's telepathic arguments. He slammed his hand down. Alarms blared. Red lights pulsed, bathing the chamber in a crimson strobe. He ripped the dampener from its housing, the cold metal biting into his skin. He moved with a desperate speed born of adrenaline and fear. Just as he jammed the dampener into the generator's interface, the wall buckled. Eleni drones, sleek and menacing, breached the chamber. The generator shuddered, then emitted a blinding flash of blue-white energy. It wasn't the sustained, roaring surge he had feared, but a controlled, contained burst. The chamber vibrated, the air crackled with ozone. Alpha groaned, his massive form twitching. The energy washed over him, and Michael could see a flicker of renewed strength in his eyes, a tightening of his atrophied muscles. The electromagnetic pulse ripped outwards. The approaching Eleni drones sputtered, their antigrav drives failing. They crashed to the floor in sparking heaps. A precious few seconds. Now, Alpha's voice echoed in Michael's mind, a raw, guttural telepathic command that bypassed his ears entirely. "Hidden passage. Behind you. Go." Michael grabbed Lyra, yanking her towards a section of the wall that shimmered faintly, almost imperceptibly. He slammed his shoulder against it, and a section of the wall slid inward, revealing a narrow, dark passage. A rush of stale, musty air assaulted his nostrils. It smelled of dust and decay. Tunnels. Ancient tunnels. Lyra gasped, her head tilting slightly. "Unstable," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The rock, it shifts, it groans." Her echolocation, even in its nascent state, was painting a terrifying picture of the tunnel's fragility. Collapse. He heard the whine of the drones powering back up, the scraping of metal on metal as they righted themselves. The Eleni commander wouldn't be fooled for long. He reached into his pack, pulling out his Omni tool. "We don't have a choice." He began stripping components from the disabled drones, his fingers flying across the damaged circuitry. He needed something, anything, to reinforce the tunnels, to buy them time. He jury-rigged a device, a crude energy shield emitter, powered by the drone's depleted power cells. It wouldn't stop a direct hit, but it might deflect some of the tunnel's instability. "This will slow the collapse," he said, activating the shield. A faint blue shimmer enveloped them, barely visible in the gloom, but not for long. Lyra tugged at his sleeve. "There, the tunnels, they meet." Her head tilted again, her echolocation working overtime. A center, a power. Alpha's voice boomed in Michael's head, overriding Lyra's. "The Nexus. The energy nexus lies deep beneath this place. It is the key." "Key to what?" Michael asked, his voice barely a whisper. "To everything," Alpha responded. "To Lyra's potential. The Nexus can amplify her abilities, focus her echolocation into a weapon, a tool." The whine of the tracker drones grew louder, closer. Michael could hear the distinct hum of their energy weapons charging. They were running out of time. "We have to go," he said, pushing Lyra forward. He turned to face the entrance, drawing his sidearm. "You two get to that Nexus, I'll hold them off." Lyra stopped dead, her small body trembling. She turned back to him, her face etched with fear and defiance. "No," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "I won't leave you." "Lyra, your empathy," she interrupted, "your resourcefulness, we need you, I need you." Alpha's voice filled Michael's mind again, tinged with a new urgency. "She is the key, Michael. She resonates with the Nexus. I can feel it, her energy. It's changing." Alpha continued. "Direct her, tell her to focus, to feel the Nexus, to create a shield." Michael hesitated, then looked at Lyra. Her eyes glowed faintly, a soft, internal light. "Lyra," he said, his voice gentle, "focus. Feel the energy around you, the Nexus. Can you sense it?" Lyra closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. A faint hum filled the tunnel, growing louder, stronger. The air crackled with energy. "Now," Alpha roared telepathically, "tell her to unleash it." "Let it go, Lyra," Michael urged. "Let the energy flow." Lyra gasped, her body arching. A torrent of energy erupted from her, a wave of pure, raw power that slammed into the surrounding rock. The tunnels pulsed with light. The energy coalesced, forming a shimmering, translucent shield around them. The tracker drones slammed into the shield, their energy weapons firing. The shield held, deflecting the blasts. The drones bounced back, their systems overloaded. A new pathway opened before them, a shimmering portal leading deeper into the earth. A voice, cold and metallic, echoed through the tunnels. It was the Eleni commander. "Seal the tunnels, collapse the structure, eliminate the targets." Suddenly, a surge of energy pulsed from the Nexus, bathing the tunnels in an ethereal glow. A holographic projection flickered into existence, an image of an ancient Eleni scientist, his face lined with worry. His voice, ancient and resonant, filled the tunnels. "The obsession with genetic purity. It is a path to destruction. A catastrophic genetic plague lies dormant within our bloodline. The culling. It only delays the inevitable. Imminent." The holographic scientist's warning echoed through the Nexus chamber, distorted by the failing energy field. The tunnel system groaned, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through Michael's bones. Dust rained down from the ceiling as he and Lyra frantically reinforced the pathway leading deeper into the Nexus, wedging salvaged metal struts against the fractured rock. "They're not giving up," Michael grunted, heaving a heavy beam into place. Lyra strained, her small hands struggling with a piece of plasteel. "They want me. They won't stop." A deafening crack ripped through the tunnel as the Eleni commander initiated controlled demolition. Rocks and debris cascaded down, forcing Michael and Lyra to shield their faces. The air filled with the acrid smell of pulverized stone and ozone. Analyzing the fractured support beams, Michael realized they were running out of time. "We need to reach that main support pillar," he shouted over the din, pointing to a massive column further down the tunnel. "If it goes, the whole section collapses." Lyra closed her eyes, focusing. I can feel the path. It's unstable, debris, everywhere." Her brow furrowed in concentration. "This way." She led him through the increasingly treacherous tunnels, her echolocation guiding them through a maze of falling rocks and twisted metal. Each tremor sent fresh cascades of debris raining down, testing Michael's reflexes. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine pierced the air, making Lyra cry out. "They're using something. It's blocking me." She stumbled, clutching her head. Michael cursed under his breath. The Eleni commander was adapting. He spotted small, metallic orbs, demolition drones hovering in the distance, emitting a pulsating field. They were designed to collapse the tunnels with pinpoint accuracy, and their high-frequency emissions were scrambling Lyra's echolocation. "Hold on." Michael ripped a section of plasteel from a fallen console, frantically jury-rigging it into a makeshift shield. He layered it with salvaged energy conduits, hoping to deflect the disruptive pulse. This might work, hopefully. He held the shield aloft, positioning it between Lyra and the drones. The pulsating whine lessened, and Lyra gasped, relief flooding her face. I can see again. Thank you, Michael." Reaching the main support pillar, Michael worked quickly, attaching salvaged drone parts to its base. Sparks flew as he connected the energy conduits, creating a localized energy field that shimmered around the pillar. For now, it would hold. The holographic scientist's projection flickered back into existence, his image wavering. The Eleni are intensifying their assault. Lyra's connection to the Nexus is growing stronger, but at a cost. Her neural pathways are becoming strained. What do you mean? Michael demanded, his voice tight with concern. Lyra's unique genetic structure. It allows her to potentially heal the damage caused by the Eleni's genetic obsession. The Nexus recognizes this. But it will require a complete merging. A conduit. A conduit, what are the risks? The projection flickered violently. Physical and mental damage, potential loss of self. The Nexus is a powerful force, but it is the only way to save it. The image dissolved, leaving Michael in stunned silence. The Eleni commander's voice boomed through the tunnels, amplified by the Nexus's systems. Michael Walker, surrender the cub and you will be spared. Resist and you will be crushed beneath the rubble. Michael's teeth gritted. He activated a distress beacon, knowing it was a desperate gamble. It might attract help from any passing ships, but it would also alert any other Eleni patrols in the area. Lyra, sensing Michael's perseverance, touched his arm. Michael, you should go. Leave me, they want me. It's my fault all this is happening. Don't say that, Michael said, his voice strained. I'm not leaving you. Lyra closed her eyes, her brow furrowed. The Nexus. It's showing me things, memories, of the ancient scientists. I'm starting to understand. The danger of the Eleni. Suddenly, a voice echoed in Michael's mind, not through his ears, but directly into his thoughts. Michael, take Lyra and flee. It was Alpha, your knowledge, your experience. It is essential for her survival. There is a hidden escape route. Through the collapsing tunnels. Lyra can guide you. Lyra looked up at Michael, her eyes wide. I see it too, a path, hidden behind the rubble. Alpha's voice echoed again in Michael's mind, urgent and strained. I cannot leave the generator to open the pathway. It is my life's purpose, Michael. Open it to the universe. Save Lyra and flee. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew the tunnels were collapsing, that every second counted. He looked at Lyra, then back towards the Nexus chamber where Alpha was surely facing certain death. He was now faced with an impossible choice. Save Lyra alone or risk everything to save Alpha by returning to the chamber knowing the pathway would collapse. Michael made the split-second decision. Alpha's sacrifice would buy them time, but he couldn't leave Lyra to be consumed by the Nexus. Alpha's final instruction dissolved, replaced by a wave of protectiveness he hadn't felt since his sister. He grabbed Lyra, her small, avian frame surprisingly light, and pulled her toward the escape route, ignoring the fading telepathic echo of Alpha's voice. Go, Michael. Save her. The pathway groaned in protest, the walls beginning to crumble. Dust and debris rained down, stinging Michael's eyes. He coughed, pulling Lyra closer, shielding her as best he could. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone and pulverized rock. You are strong, Michael. Alpha's voice resonated faintly in his mind, a final whisper across the psychic bridge. She needs you. They reached the hidden escape route just as the tunnel behind them collapsed completely, sealing off the Nexus chamber with a deafening roar. Michael stumbled forward, dragging Lyra with him, into the unknown. The escape route opened into a dark, cyclopean chamber. Strange technology hummed with latent power, casting eerie shadows that danced across walls covered in glowing symbols. The air thrummed with an energy that made Michael's teeth ache. Suddenly, Lyra gasped, her body stiffening. She began to tremble violently, her unseeing eyes wide with an unseen terror. Visions flooded her mind, glimpses of the Nexus's ancient past, the Eleni's meticulously engineered future, a tapestry of genetic perfection and ruthless culling. She saw the rise and fall of civilizations, the sterile beauty of the Eleni homeworld, and the chilling efficiency of their genetic protocols. Michael noticed her distress. Lyra, what's wrong? He reached out to comfort her, but she was unresponsive, lost in the torrent of images. Her pupils dilated, reflecting the glowing symbols on the walls. The chamber began to react to Lyra's presence. Ancient machinery whirred to life, its gears grinding after eons of dormancy. Energy surged through the room, causing the glowing symbols to pulse with increased intensity. The air crackled with static electricity. Lyra, overwhelmed by the visions, collapsed to her knees, a strangled cry escaping her lips. Her body began to glow with an ethereal nexus energy, radiating outward like a beacon. "Lyra," Michael shouted, desperately trying to reach her. He wanted to disconnect her from whatever was happening, to shield her from the onslaught of visions. But an invisible energy field shimmered around her, preventing him from getting close. He pushed against it, feeling a jolt of electricity that sent his muscles spasming. Then a voice, cold and devoid of emotion, echoed through the chamber. It was the Eleni commander. "Foolish human, you cannot protect what is destined to be ours. The Nexus has chosen her. She is now one with the collective." The commander's voice dripped with smug satisfaction. "This chamber is a teleportation device, designed to transport her directly to the Eleni homeworld, where her unique genetic code will be integrated." Lyra, regaining consciousness with a gasp, understood. The Eleni weren't just going to study her, they were going to assimilate her, erase her individuality. "Michael," she croaked, her voice weak but urgent, "you have to destroy it, before it's too late." Michael, remembering Alpha's teachings, saw a panel sparking with energy. He realized he could try to reroute the power, destabilize the teleportation device. It would buy them time, but risked blowing up the entire chamber. Before he could make his move, the Eleni commander's voice echoed again, permeated with triumph. "The teleportation sequence is initiated. You cannot stop what is inevitable." He had activated the device remotely. Michael cursed, realizing the trap. They were going to be teleported along with the chamber. He had no other choice. He lunged for the power conduits, ripping wires and rerouting energy flows with desperate speed. The chamber shuddered, groaning under the strain. Alarms blared. Then, with a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar, the chamber activated, enveloping Michael and Lyra in a wave of pure energy. The world dissolved into nothingness. Then, just as suddenly, it reformed. Michael and Lyra materialized in a completely alien environment. The air was thick with the stench of chemicals and decay. Strange, bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie glow on twisted metal structures and bubbling vats of viscous fluid. Hostile creatures, their eyes glowing with predatory hunger, scuttled in the shadows. Unfamiliar technology hummed and pulsed around them. Lyra, despite her blindness, recognized the energy signature. "We're in Eleni territory, Michael," she whispered, her voice filled with dread. "A hidden research facility, dedicated to genetic experimentation." Awareness slammed into them, cold and sharp as the metallic tang in the air. Michael and Lyra materialized, not gently but abruptly, their stomachs lurching as if they'd been dropped from a height. Disorientation clawed at Michael's senses. The air hung thick with the antiseptic stench of a sterile environment, almost overpowering. Alarms, not deafening but subtly insistent, pulsed a rhythmic warning in the distance, each blare a hammer blow against his skull. Lyra gasped, clutching her head. Fragmented visions, shards of distorted light and chilling sounds flooded her mind. She stumbled, her small hand finding Michael's arm for support. They hurt them," she stammered, her voice a thin thread of sound. Despite the swirling chaos in his own head, Raining kicked in. He scanned their surroundings, his eyes darting from the polished metal walls to the seamless, impenetrable doors. Security cameras, like watchful metallic eyes, swiveled on articulated arms, tracking their every move. Automated defense systems, barely visible behind retractable panels, hinted at lethal force held in reserve. This wasn't just a lab, it was a prison. Lyra trembled, her violet eyes wide with remembered horror. "I saw Eleni, scientists cutting changing, others like me. Flawed, they called them. The image burned in her mind, a nightmare of cold, clinical cruelty. Michael pushed past his own disorientation, focusing on the details, the layout, the equipment. It all spoke of a genetic research facility, albeit one far more advanced and sinister than anything he'd encountered on Earth. This facility. It's compartmentalized, he muttered, more to himself than to Lyra. Research labs holding cells, probably a central control hub, if we can find a schematic. A low growl, guttural and menacing, echoed from down the corridor. Two creatures emerged from the shadows, their forms vaguely canine but twisted into something monstrous. Genetically modified guard dogs, their muscles bulging beneath taut, leathery skin, their eyes burning with predatory intelligence. Enhanced senses, he knew, meant they could smell them, hear them, maybe even sense their body heat. "Hide," Michael hissed, pulling Lyra behind a large, cylindrical container. The dogs padded closer, their snouts twitching, their growls intensifying. Lyra pressed against him, her small body trembling. Another vision, sharper this time, pierced her consciousness. The data, the information, it's in a restricted sector, Sector Gamma 7, but it's guarded. Michael shook his head. No, too risky. We need to IND a way out, not deeper in. He knew the odds, he knew the dangers. He wasn't a hero, he was a geneticist. But it's important, Lyra insisted, her voice pleading. They were planning something terrible, we have to know. He looked at her, at the tenacity in her blind eyes, and his perseverance faltered. There's a ventilation shaft, he said, sighing, over there. He pointed towards a barely visible grate high on the wall. It's a long shot, but it's the only way I see. They moved quickly, silently, hugging the shadows. The ventilation shaft was indeed heavily guarded. Two of the modified dogs paced back and forth, their senses on high alert. I can hear them, Lyra whispered, her brow furrowed in concentration. One is closer, to the left, the other is farther, near the corner. Her echolocation, nascent but growing stronger, was their only advantage. Michael nodded. I need to create a diversion, something to draw them away. He glanced at a nearby control panel, his fingers itching to manipulate the system. A false alarm. In another sector. That might work. He moved swiftly, accessing the panel and inputting a series of commands. Alarms blared in the distance, red lights flashing, chaos erupting in a sector far removed from their own. The diversion worked, drawing one of the dogs away. But the other remained, its gaze fixed on the ventilation shaft. Lyra focused, her brow beaded with sweat. He's agitated. He senses something. You have to be quick. Michael moved with practiced efficiency, disabling the remaining guard dog with a pressure point strike to its neck. Non-lethal, but effective. He couldn't afford to kill unless he absolutely had to. He boosted Lyra up to the ventilation shaft, then followed, pulling himself into the cramped, claustrophobic space. The metal was cold against his skin, the air thick with dust and the stale smell of disuse. The sounds of a leany pursuit, distorted and amplified, echoed nearby. They crawled forward, inching their way through the narrow tunnels, their progress slow and agonizing. Finally, they reached their destination, Sector Gamma 7, the restricted area. A terminal bathed in a cold, blue light stood in the center of the room. As Lyra accessed the data, a holographic projection flickered to life. The image of the Eleni commander, cold and ruthless, filled the room. So, the flawed one and her pet have managed to penetrate my defenses, the commander sneered. Impressive, but ultimately futile. This facility is about to be purged. All traces of our experiments will be eliminated. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. They were trapped. Purged, what does that mean? Lyra's voice was strained. He means destroyed. They're going to destroy the entire facility. Another vision, this one even clearer, flashed through her mind. There's an escape pod bay, Sector Delta 9, but he's waiting there. The data scrolled across the screen, revealing the horrifying truth. The experiments weren't just about eliminating flaws. They were about creating a super soldier program, enhancing the Eleni genome, turning them into weapons. The terminal pinged, displaying a warning message. Override system detected. Catastrophic meltdown imminent. There's an override system, Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper. It can cause a meltdown of the facility's core, but it's heavily guarded. Michael stared at the screen, his mind racing. Escape was impossible. The commander was waiting for them, but maybe, just maybe. We trigger the meltdown, he said, his voice grim. Destroy the facility. Maybe we can escape in the chaos. He knew it was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was the only chance they had. The klaxons blared, painting the narrow corridors in strobing red. Michael gripped Lyra's hand, pulling her forward. Automated turrets swiveled, spitting plasma fire that sizzled against the reinforced bulkheads. Echolocation, he yelled over the din. Tell me where they're aiming. Lyra closed her eyes, her head tilted slightly. A cascade of clicks emanated from her throat, bouncing off the metal walls. Left, high, right, low, middle, constant barrage. Her voice was strained but clear. Michael weaved through the laser fire, using Lyra's guidance to anticipate each attack. He fired back with his stolen pulse rifle, disabling the turrets one by one. Almost there, he gasped, rounding a corner. An Eleni guard stood blocking their path, his energy weapon charged. Before Michael could react, Lyra unleashed another volley of clicks. The guard flinched, momentarily disoriented. Michael seized the opportunity, tackling him to the ground and disarming him. They reached the override system, a massive console bathed in ominous light. Doctor standing before it was Dr. Aris Thorne, his face etched with a mixture of desperation and dedication. Michael, stop. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly, Thorne, Michael snarled. You're protecting your precious super soldier project. Thorne shook his head. I'm trying to save you both. This system is unstable. If you try to override it, you'll trigger a chain reaction that will destroy the entire facility. Then we'll just have to be careful, won't we? Michael retorted, stepping towards the console. Thorne blocked his path. Don't you see? I helped build this. I know its vulnerabilities. I know how to control it. He paused, his voice cracking. I thought I could control it. That's what I told myself when I agreed to assist with the super soldier program. I thought I could steer it towards ethical applications, prevent it from being used for this. He gestured around the lab, but I was wrong. I became a part of the problem. Michael stared at him, his anger slowly giving way to confusion. What are you saying? Thorne's shoulders slumped. I made compromises, Michael, terrible compromises. I justified them by telling myself it was for the greater good, but there is no greater good when the cost is this. Lyra, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke. There's a resonance, a vibration, deep within the system, a flaw. It's subtle, almost imperceptible. She touched the console tentatively. It's like a hidden echo. Michael looked at her, then back at Thorne. Can you use that? Can you redirect the meltdown? Thorne hesitated, then nodded slowly. I know the system's architecture. I know its weaknesses, but I need her insight. Together, they worked frantically, Thorne guiding Michael through the complex code, Lyra providing a unique perspective, her echolocation revealing hidden pathways and vulnerabilities. Redirect the energy flow, Lyra instructed. Bypass the primary containment field. Target the research matrix directly. Michael typed furiously, adapting Thorne's knowledge and Lyra's discovery. The console sparked and the room began to shake. It's working, he yelled. But we have to get out of here. Thorne nodded. The escape pods are that way. I'll cover you. As the facility groaned under the strain, they raced towards the escape pod bay. An Eleni commander stood waiting, his face contorted with rage. You will not escape, he roared, raising his weapon. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes glowing faintly. She unleashed a rapid series of clicks, creating a sonic barrage that disoriented the commander. She then moved with surprising speed, disarming him with a precise strike to his neural disruptor. Go, she shouted. I'll hold him off. Michael and Thorn scrambled into the escape pod. As the hatch slammed shut, a recording blared over the facility's comm system, triggered by the impending meltdown. It was Thorn's voice, confessing his role in the unethical experiments, exposing the Eleni High Council's lies to the entire network. The pod launched, rocketing away from the facility just as it exploded in a blinding flash. The blast was visible even on the frozen moon's surface, a testament to the destructive power they had unleashed. Adrift in space, they were rescued by a faction of Eleni scientists who opposed the High Council's policies. They had heard Thorn's confession and were ready to fight for a more ethical future. In the months that followed, Michael, Lyra, and Thorn became ambassadors for a new era of interspecies understanding and genetic acceptance. They traveled the galaxy, sharing their story and advocating for the rights of all beings, regardless of their genetic makeup. Years later, Michael and Lyra stood on Earth, gazing up at the stars. Lyra closed her eyes, and a faint smile touched her lips. "I can see them, Michael," she whispered. "Not with my eyes, but with my senses. I can see the constellations, the nebulae, the galaxies, the whole universe." Michael put his arm around her, pride swelling in his chest. She saw the universe with a greater understanding, a deeper connection than he could ever imagine. Thorn joined them, his gaze also fixed on the heavens. "There's so much more to discover," he said, a hint of hope in his voice. "So much more to learn." They stood together, three figures silhouetted against the starlit sky, united by their shared experiences, their unwavering commitment to a better future, looking into the stars, ready to face whatever the future may bring.